Here we are. We're at the end. We're wrapping up. When Oscar's done, we're going to talk about happy hour. We're talk about going on the field, and we're talk about after parties. But Oscar's got some really good wisdom to share with you about dissecting the ransomware Killchain. And what I get to say about Oscar, he's the CTO at FRSecure. And he's got nearly 2 decades of experiences in the industry. He oversees the in-house team of our experts that are spanning red teaming, blue teaming, consulting operations, and he's also a member of our executive leadership team. A few other words that come to mind if you say Oscar to me are bourbon, fishing, Kentucky, ginger, and wildcats. All right, so if I missed any, feel free to catch me up later. I give you Oscar. Have fun.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. Hello, everybody. I'm Oscar, like she said. Super happy to be here today, and then also super thankful that all you beautiful people are here, and also you're sitting down and you're listening. That's really cool. But yeah, this is great. Before I roll, our marketing team did a phenomenal job, and I know Renee's going to say this again, but shout out to Andy and Brandon and Nick and all those guys. Give them a hand. So also, a little about myself. I'm a human, and these things make me a little anxious when I'm here. And so I'm trying the tactic, everybody knows of just picture everybody in their underwear and you'll feel better. So if I stare at you and make a funny face, you can do it back at me and we'll both feel better. It'll be awesome. I like having fun when I do these talks. I don't like death by slides. I try to make this all easy to understand for everyone who's here. But that being said, too, if you have questions, interrupt me at any point. That's no big deal. So I manage our security team. I'm the CTO for FRSecure. So I oversee our amazing red team, which you guys got to meet a couple of those folks just now. They're truly phenomenal. Our blue team, unfortunately, those guys, Pinky was going to be here and had to cancel. They're amazing. Our consulting team, there's some brilliant minds in the crowd. Make sure you get to know them. They're awesome people, and I just feel super lucky to be in the position I am to be here today with you all. As Renee mentioned, I'm Kentucky born and raised. I wanted to change this slide to born and breaded, but like a chicken leg. I didn't. I love helping people. It's really what drives me the most. And besides that, I like hacking things, stopping hackers. I love to fish, and I love to play music. That's a cool picture of me holding a trout that's way bigger than anything Michael Kennedy has ever caught, I think. I don't know where he's at. He promised a bigger fish picture to show me up today, but I didn't see it, so I don't know if you guys did. I also like playing music. It's funny, I do a lot of these talks, and I used to play music a lot, and you always got to have bourbon before you played music, but most of these talks you don't get to, and so I like this format better, so let's keep this rolling in the industry. 18 years in the industry, blah, blah, blah stuff, blah, blah, blah. I like memes too, so we will incorporate memes into the talk. So numbers and stuff. This is the scary things. The slide deck isn't meant to scare you, but this shit's scary. The highest ransomware payout ever, $40 million, CNA Financial. I'm sure most of you heard about that last year. The point is costs are trending up. They will continue to trend up. Ransomware is a very profitable industry. The average ransomware feed request, just to have a look over the years, in 2018 was around $5,000, up to about $200,000 the next year, up to about $600,000 in 2021. And 2022, who knows, we might break the $1 million mark. Average downtime today is around 21 days. And so what I would ask everyone out here to think about is your business built to sustain a 21-day downtime? No. That's the average. There are people that we all work with and we help that obviously recover much quicker. And there are obviously people that recover much slower. But point being here, most businesses can't sustain 21 days. This is the point of my talk and why I'm here. I hate seeing people suffer, good people suffer who own small businesses. And so hopefully we'll give you information today that you can find useful for your security program. The total ransomware costs were $20 billion in 2021, and to compare, in 2017 it was just $5 billion. And all sectors are being targeted. Money is money. Now, sure, there are some businesses who have proprietary secrets, who have a higher monetary value than others. That being said, everyone's at risk. We work with large organizations all the way through small co-ops that have maybe 5 people on staff total, including the owners. And I hate having the conversation when someone says, why would they target me? Why would they target me? We don't even have the money to pay. And the reality is money is money. So why should I care, or why should you care? I left this blank. I think you all know why you should care. If you don't get that yet, maybe you're in the wrong place. But it's time for me. What if I told you that a page with this page intentionally left blank is in fact not blank? Anybody? Jokes, laughs? Okay, we'll keep trying. I get better, I think. If like Eric brings me a whiskey, I'll probably get a little better. I don't know, we'll see. So I'm gonna talk about the Killchain today. The Killchain was developed by Lockheed Martin, and essentially it's the pwn-to-own method, what an adversary must do to achieve their goal. There are six phases, and I think our friends from Huntress talked about that. I trimmed this to be more relevant to ransomware as we see in our investigations today. So we'll talk through the identification, the recon phase, the initial attack, command and control, discover and spread, exfiltration and encryption, and then more importantly, takeaways, things that you can do outside of this kill chain to try to protect your organization. So the first step is the identification and the recon. We just gotta figure out who you are here at this point, right? And so these are just a list of things that attackers are going to be enumerating on your environment so they can begin to design their initial attack and their initial attack methodology. Things that they're gonna look at is the domain who is. And a lot of these may seem benign to people unless you really think about the importance. In a domain who is, what might I be able to find? Maybe I can identify who your network administrator is, a potential target. I can identify physical locations where your business exists. I can identify other key contacts within your organization that we're gonna put to our list and compile our list of potential targets as we continue to develop our attack. Also looking at personal information, and personal information here also goes into the social environment. So let's see what type of information are your employees leaking about your organization. Good examples here are maybe people are excited they got a new job and they're gonna share a photo of their badge and they're like, look at this, I'm working for this dope new company, here's my badge to prove it. That's valuable information when an attacker is targeting your organization. The more we know, the more we grow. Email harvesting is rather simple, so we're gonna accumulate all the targets in the organization we can. Try to identify a list of known valid emails, more so identify the structure in which you're creating email accounts. So what I mean by that is first name dot last name, first letter, last name, so on and so on. And most of the time, that structure will relate to your domain infrastructure as well. So guess what? We have more targets as we build our attack. Continuing there, we're gonna look at all your domains, your subdomains, and identify potential squatting domains. So what I mean here is what domains are you using? How can I mimic those domains when I develop my attack against you to create fake domains that look to the human eye very similar to those legitimate domains as we begin to develop our social attack. Obviously, we're gonna look at your external IP space, identify your ASN, try to enumerate all your IPs, discover what services you're running, what ports are open, and obviously any known vulnerabilities. Beyond that, we're gonna look for leak creds. I mean, this is a big thing. I think we've talked about it today a few times, but there are easy ways to retain and get leak credential sets. We run a project called Project High Fee, and one of the things we do is we share with you, how many leak cred sets that you get. I can't give you an average, so I think Eric said all statistics are made up, but almost every org, you got a couple hundred leak creds out there. And so be in touch with those things, make sure you're understanding credentials as they are being leaked and you're responding to those internally. Other things to think about too is encouraging your users not to use those business accounts for personal activities. We see that a lot where there's applications that may be compromised, where your employees are using their business creds for personal stuff. Don't do that, it's bad. Vendor associations are really important as well as we begin to design a social engineering attack. Going back to the social, if we can identify that perhaps you have an MSP, there's photos of maybe stickers on your systems that tell me who you're associated with, then we're gonna know we can pose as that vendor that you work with. Scraping through socials more and more, essentially just to identify who do you work with, because now I know all of your employees work through to identify soft targets. We identify your email naming scheme. So we've got a great list and we start to develop our attack. Knowing who your vendors are is really important. And then beyond that, metadata. So looking at the metadata in the documents that you may be sharing. People don't think about that a lot. But in every document, there's metadata that may give information about the tools that you're using to create that data, the user who created that data, their title within the company, and so on, which is all valuable information. So all we're doing right now is saying, I want to get to know you a little better, right? So I like memes. You guys like It's Always Sunny?
Oscar,
Yo.
I think I speak for everybody in this room. We would like you to take a breath and maybe have some whiskey. It's up to you.
Thanks. Charlie Day, does anybody like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? The gang beats Boggs, remember that? We're Charlie Day right now. Instead of 40 beers, we've got like all your data that we need to own you. So now, let's move into the initial attack phase. And this is really important. This goes back to what our panel was talking about before. O-days versus having a solid security program. Don't be silly here, know the payload. It's not always leet. In most cases, it's not leet. Our adversaries are humans just like us, and our adversaries will take the path of least resistance always. And what that means is through that previous step of the identification and recon, they're likely going to identify low-hanging fruit, which will allow ease of access into your environment. Those are the infrastructures that are most commonly attacked. We'll talk more about statistics that I see in our incident response program later, but there's a common theme there. They also persist as well, and this is something that we see actually. We sent out a blast last week regarding the new proxy logon, proxy shell exploit. And Microsoft recommended to block access to specific pages and set the response to a 403 forbidden. And Eric and I were actually talking about this. It was like, why not just abort the request versus give them a forbidden back? And so the idea there is because if the attacker knows the access is forbidden, they complete that connection, they understand the access is blocked, they're likely going to move on and find another target. Whereas if you leave that kind of hanging in the air, where it's an abort, they don't really know, maybe it timed out or so on. And a lot of these attacks, especially like proxy logon and proxy shell, in the initial phases are very, very scripted. And so they're going to continue to target and continue to attack that. Beyond that, again, they're just going to continue to persist and try to identify your soft targets in the organization. If the first soft target doesn't work, and maybe that's a known vulnerability where you had another layer of security that was able to prevent that from being exploited, they'll continue to move on. But another way to look at soft targets too, if we go back to understanding that our adversaries are humans, is understanding who your soft target as a human may be within your organization. I know that often employees that are newer to an organization are going to know less about policy. They're going to know less about what to do in specific situations, and even more so, they're going to be wired to try to please those around them. So developing a social engineering campaign where you may pose as someone with a position of authority and identifying individuals who are soft targets because of their rather newness to your organization, then your chance of success significantly increases. So we got our attack plan, we figured out our path, and we got all this sweet stuff. We know how we're getting in, and we're gonna Larry and Tosser it. We're gonna send it. Does anybody know who Larry and Tosser is? Yeah? Yeah. Don't be silly. All right, so what are the popular delivery methods today? And this is just based on statistics that we see from our own casework and things that we do. Open RDP is still a thing. We still get cases every single year where people have remote desktop open to the internet, and it's Why? Why do we do this? I don't understand. We've been talking about this for 20 years, so don't do that. Everybody here, if you have that open, I see some of you taking notes. I'm joking. I didn't see anybody turn their head when I said that, so that's really good. Shut it down. Other things are open management systems. You guys remember Kaseya last year? I know you're all familiar with the SolarWinds attack. I like to talk about that SolarWinds attack a lot. It was a supply chain attack. And I think a lot of people thought that, it was an O-Day. It was not preventable. The initial payload was not preventable. So they deployed an update into your environment, which included malware. This is true. But the initial malware was somewhat benign. It wasn't destructive in your environment. The initial piece of malware was a means to deploy a secondary payload. And to deploy the secondary payload, your SolarWinds environment had to have untethered access to the internet to contact a server, get the payload, and deploy that. So what's the fix here? You don't let your SolarWinds server talk to the internet, right? We'll talk more about mitigations, but that's a recurring theme. Default deny is still a thing. It's a very important thing. The same thing with Kaseya, a management system that had untethered access into the system from anywhere in the internet. Why does your remote management system need to allow access from all IPs in the world? It doesn't. Allow listing would have circumvented further attacks on that environment. People say it's not easy to do. That's true, it's not easy, but security's not easy. Still, the right thing to do is implement allow listing, only permit the IPs that need to be there into that environment. We still see a lot of VPN without MFA. Again, silly, don't do that. O365 without MFA, don't do that. Phishing, vishing, smishing, not so much the vishing. Smishing is really on the rise. There are some vishing cases, but social engineering is still king. Known vulnerabilities are down the list, and then O-Day's kind of at the bottom here, like we talked about. A lot of these O-Day attacks, like it's true, you will likely be exploited if you're running the application that's vulnerable within a short period of time. The destructive phase doesn't occur until much, much later. So what I mean, again, we'll go back to the new Exchange vulnerabilities that I hope you guys all sent our email on, and you're well versed in this. But so when these new vulnerabilities are published, exploits are identified, our adversaries begin scanning the internet, identifying everywhere this service is running, and then spraying and praying. So they're blasting the exploit, hoping they find your system, they exploit your system, and essentially dropping access to come back later and further own that environment. So the reality is, if we've got, I don't know how many Exchange servers worldwide, if there's 500,000, within a couple of days, 250,000 of those are going to be compromised. Well, our attackers don't have time to deploy ransom on all 250,000 systems. They will identify their high-profile targets through previous phases of identification and recon. You're going to be first, but they'll work down that line, or they're going to sell your access to other people who may have an interest into your business. And the actual time to truly destructive events from those O-Days is pretty significant. Not saying we shouldn't do the right thing, but I think Judy said this: if you build your security program, you'll know how to respond to O-Days. And then supply chain attacks, they're obviously on the rise. We're seeing more and more of those. Talk about Kaseya, talk about SolarWinds. We've seen that with JDI. There's a lot of avenues for that. We've been talking about that on the Hacklebox a lot lately. I think that will continue to persist, but having a strong security program in place still circumvents most of those. I didn't know a good meme for this slide, so I'll put that up. I don't think that meme's what you think it means. No? All right. I heard a laugh. That was a good laugh, too. Yeah. All right, so still continuing with the initial attack. How am I doing on time? I'm all right? All right. So these are just techniques, and again, it's not always leap, but it can be. And so going back to this previous steps, like we're gonna look at the low-hanging fruit. There's also gonna be specific attacks that are gonna be used to try to gain access into your environment. Just to reiterate all these things, yeah, these are attacks that we use. Password reuse is real bad, don't do that. Lack of MFA is really bad, don't do that. And more importantly, when you deploy MFA, deploy it right. I think I'll talk about that later, but I'll say it like 5 times so we all remember that. Or you'll be like, what's right mean? And I'll tell you later. But human exploitation is still king. I mean, we are working on an annual DFIR report, so we'll have super good statistics on this, right, Tyler? Yeah, real soon. But a large majority of our attacks still originate from human exploitation. We can build the strongest security programs, the dopest security stacks with all the blinky lights and shiny toys, but at the end of the day, we're still humans and we're still vulnerable, and we have to understand that we are. All of us in here are security professionals, we're vulnerable, and so is everyone around us. And we'll talk about that too more later. But you're hacker man now. We got all this sweet stuff, these sweet techniques in there. You're hacker man? Yeah, all right. So just to explain what a command and control is, ultimately the next phase here is we identify our initial point of ingress into your environment. We establish persistence and connectivity into your environment. Most cases today, we're talking about the ransomware Killchain through the use of a command and control. And so command and control is just essentially at super high level, a means for the attacker to have command line keyboard access to a system within your network so they can further continue their attack. Some popular CNCs today are Cobalt Strike, Covenant, Empire. Brute Retail is a newer one that's making a lot of waves lately. I'm not gonna explain these in depth. Some are embedded in the stage 1 payload. That's important. Anchor was a really good example of that. If you guys remember that last year, I believe. But there is a cool link I have here called the c2matrix.com, and I would recommend all you guys, if you're not familiar with the different flavors of C2s, to check out the C2 matrix and educate yourself. If you have questions about that, you can hit us up and we'll help you out as well. These C2s can become, from a blue team perspective, they can be challenging to identify. They can be challenging to identify all of the nodes within your network that are compromised, and a lot of folks just don't understand that side of hunting true C2s that have good obfuscation and evasion techniques. They can operate on different protocols. HTTP, we see a lot, SMP, and DNS. So it's important, again, when we talk about that security program of having good logs in place. And I know there was discussion on our last panel about why logging is important. This is why it's important. The C2, you're not gonna know it's there. Probably it's gonna have a significant dwell time. So when you do identify that C2 or that compromised system, it's important to have perhaps your point of egress log all traffic in and out of your network so we can hunt to identify all systems that may be compromised. DNS logging as well. We see that kind of as a standard, DNS logging is pretty poor. You may see DNS requests at a high level, but being able to trace a unique DNS request back to an individual host is really challenging in our environment. So every opportunity you have to increase your logging levels of DNS, I recommend you do so. C2s can run on pretty much any OS, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. I will say the majority of the cases that we work are in Windows environments. I expect that the Linux environment is going to increase just because of the percentage of systems that are Linux throughout our world within server architecture, but yeah. And our attackers, once they establish the command and control framework within your environment, are going to focus on laying low, living off the land, using a lot of tools that maybe your sysadmins are already using tools that aren't necessarily identified as malicious by your endpoint detection software and so on. And so as a blue teamer, your job is going to be to identify anomalies in the behavior of those tools, which is very important. Persistence is key here too. And so if you identify, I've seen this a lot where maybe an organization identified a system, they got an EDR trigger that said, hey, there's a C2 on this box. And so what they do, they took the box, they rebuilt the box, closed the case and moved on. 6 months later, they're fully ransomed. And that's because they believed it was an isolated incident. In most cases, if you find that in one place, it's very likely going to be in other places on your network, and it may not be the only point of access. So it's really important to make sure when you do identify these potential compromised hosts, don't throw it in the washing machine, run it through the ringer, and move on with your life, because persistence is key. And a big thing here for everybody to understand is if the initial attack vector is a compromised VPN, remote administration service, remote desktop service, then our attackers don't need CNCs. I think the guy from Huntress was talking about like a dwell time of maybe you got like 4 hours, right? And that is very, very fast on the end of the spectrum from pwn to own and have a full ransom. We've seen that before, where an attacker was able to get into an environment and fully deploy ransom to every server in their environment within a matter of hours. And it's because they had a VPN with single-factor authentication. The VPN with single-factor authentication too didn't use groups. There was no access groups, no network segmentation. So our attacker had full access into the network with an admin cred that also worked in the domain. And so they were literally able to ransom the entire enterprise in just a few hours. So what do? We VPN. But so now they have complete control. Can somebody give me a roar? There it is. All right, still awake, dope. So after we establish command and control, we have a persistence in your environment. The next step is to enumerate. Woo, we're in, baby. What do we do now? And really, it's like, let's find all your active IPs first. Where can I go in the network? What systems are live? And we'll start enumerating those systems and understanding what services are running on those systems. But like, let's look for your crown jewels here. Do you have proprietary information? Do you have trade secrets? Do you have PI? Do you have data that's going to be very valuable for me on the dark web? I don't know, but we're going to try to find that. And that's what I consider the crown jewels. This next one is super, super important. We're going to find your backup service. Before we go to the next phase of encryption and exfiltration, we're going to find all the stuff that matters to you, all the stuff that permits your business to operate on a day-to-day basis, because their goal is to make sure your business is restricted, inoperable, therefore your chances of paying a ransom increase significantly. But if you've got backups and you can restore, then you don't have to worry about it, right? Right. However, see so many people that are still using network-connected backups, and it's like, well, they're immutable. Well, they're immutable unless you have the admin account that can change that from immutable to mutable. They're on a different set, they use a different set of creds. They're not attached to our domain. Well, that's cool until they're able to find those creds and get into your backup server. Most ransomware cases we see today where someone is using an online backup system, those backups are destroyed before they ever go into the ransom activity. And to the point too, where most people don't even know those backups have been destroyed. We have so many calls where we get on, hey, we're ransomed, we understand the impact, the number of servers, and we say, do you have backups? Yeah, we have good backups. Awesome. Are your backups network connected? Yeah, they are. We can get to them real quick. We can restore right away. Have you tested those backups? No, we haven't. We'll go test your backups. 90% of the time, they come back and they say our backups are corrupted too. And so there's no path to recovery. I said risk-covery. It's a new word. Recovery. Hey, easy now. So the key and the moral of that story is to get your backups offline, use tape. And I've had people before be like, you mean LTO? Like, yeah, use LTO. Use disk, use whatever you have. Get your backups offline. And that can be a financial increase to the organization. And so you just have to think about like, how much data can I afford to lose, right? Really figure that out. Is it 1 day of data? Is it a week of data? Is it a month of data? I don't know. There's gonna be variation from business to business, but you really have to assess yourself and understand what that is and make sure you have a backup system in place that you can support and sustain offline backups. So in the event that you do have a ransom activity, you can successfully recover. Did I skip? Where am I at? What was I even talking about? Yeah, so obviously you're gonna target your domain admins and all that good stuff. And this is just a privilege escalation, other techniques that are used by our attackers. But the idea here is, I'm in your network, I'm gonna enumerate everything, I know where all your systems is, know where all your important data is, and as I further enumerate to different points in your network, well, let's recreate this exercise and see if from point A to point B yields me a new activity to get from point B to point C and C to D, and continue until like we feel like we've enumerated all of your data, we've found your backups, we've destructed your backups, We know where our crucial targets are from when we launch our ransom attack. We're ready to roll at this point. And so all your base are belong to us. So now it's time for the bad day for everyone. It's the exfiltration and the encryption event. Every case we work, obviously, our goal is to get you back up and running, get your business operable as quick as we can. But everybody wants to know, did they steal my data? Did they steal my data? But nobody's got the logging in place for me to be able to tell you, yeah, they stole your data, or no, they didn't. We try our best to be able to identify exfiltration activities. It's kind of a dark art. But there are techniques, like we look for residues of archive files, right? We see our attackers, before they exfiltrate data, if you've got a large volume, they're gonna compress the data and make that data easier to get off your network and hopefully lower the chance of detection. We also look for egress logs to see if there is any indication of file sharing applications that aren't standard in your organization. Mega share is used a lot, so that's one we look for, but really anything can be used. We've seen all flavors here. And so why it goes back to having a good security program again is know the applications that are in use. So if we come to you and we say, hey, there's Dropbox activity from your servers, is that normal? Well, I don't know. Then we're not gonna be able to solve this mystery. We can look for email forwarding. That happens a lot too, especially if people are offloading data from SharePoint repositories and online repositories. They'll truck those out the compromised user's mailbox a lot of times. Looking at non-typical methods of access or non-typical anomalies for file access. So specific users who don't typically access specific files or directories, but during this previous to the ransom attack, we've seen activity from those users accessing these specific files is an indicator that, there's a good chance that we're trucking those files out the back. But realistically, it boils down a lot of times to saying, let's look at your outbound throughput over a 12-month average. Let's look at the time period the attack occurred and see if we see spikes in data leaving your network and egress data. And we typically see that. But then we get into a bigger mess because we don't have the logging enabled to be able to understand what files were accessed, of saying what was exfiltrated. And unfortunately, when we get into that place, we can prove exfiltration did occur. We can't prove what was exfiltrated. We have to assume that everything was exfiltrated, which, as you all know, is a really bad day. Then we got the data out, and so now it's encryption time. This is a sad, sad day here. Encryption methods are getting fast now, and they're getting faster. Every new variant we test is getting faster and faster and faster. And the reality and what we're seeing today is that most people are seeing alerts on their storage before they even realize they're encrypted. Why is my SAN screaming at me? Why is the CPU through the roof? I don't know. 5 minutes later, they get reports from users that everything's down. Then they try to log onto a server and see all the files are encrypted. People come to us a lot too and say, is there an option to get a decryptor without negotiating the ransom? No, there's not. 99.9% of the time there's not. Every now and then you'll see a hacker with a heart, and they've owned a bunch of people and they release their encryption keys. So it is important, if you're ever in the situation to where you do have to completely rebuild and you've lost all your data, still save that old data, because we have seen patterns where some APTs, when they retire, will give their decryptors away so you could get that data back later. But it's gonna be a long, long time. Your business can't sustain that type of outage. And again, even your backups are screwed here. So it's a, bad day. But wait, there's more. We're seeing, when I originally started working this deck, I made this a year and a half ago or something. It was double extortion. And then triple extortion became a thing. And so essentially, hey, we're gonna steal all your data. We're gonna sell your data. We're gonna encrypt your network. And if you don't pay us, we're gonna go to press, and we're also gonna DDoS your network, and you're not gonna be able to sustain. So they're forcing more and more people into situations where they feel like they have to pay. Having a strong security program is critical. But let's talk about like other things that we've seen. Disappearing threat actors, this is real. It turns out like our adversaries aren't always the most trustworthy people. That's crazy, right? 10 minutes? All right. So in the case where you are encrypted, we've seen people that had no choice. And I always advise against paying the ransom because we don't fund terrorists. I hate it. But they're saying we have to pay. And guess what? The threat actor disappears. Or they try to negotiate, say, hey, it's a $2 million ransom. How about we give you 1.5 to get our data back? And the threat actor pretty much says, screw yourself, you'll hear from me in a week. And guess what? Every day that business is bleeding more and more money. Broken decryption keys is real. Sometimes our attackers aren't as good as we think they are. Actually, they're pretty bad a lot of the times, honestly. Most cases we work, we're looking in here going, how stupid was this? So yeah, they screw up the encryption keys as well. It's not a guarantee when you pay to get that decryptor, it's even going to work. And a broken encryption method. So we once seen a ransom case where the infrastructure had millions of files, millions and millions of files. And every server was encrypted, and the attacker had botched the ransom deployment. And so typically there's a unique decryptor for each server or unique decryptor for the environment, but they actually made unique decryptors for every single file on the network. And so then, even if you get the decryptor, you have to decrypt each file individually, and we're talking millions of files. Like, how long is that gonna take? You're screwed. Like, the downtime keeps going through the roof. We look at that mean downtime. These are the reasons why that average gets pushed so high. OFAC sanction is real. A lot of our APTs end up on the OFAC sanction list. And if an attacker's on there, what that means is you can't pay them or you're criminally responsible by the United States government. And we've worked cases before where, yeah, it's to the point the business we're working with has no opportunity to recover unless they negotiate with the ransom actor. They begin negotiations with the ransom actor. The FBI steps in and says, hey, you can't send that money. And if you do, you're in pretty big trouble here. And it gets real tricky there too, because adversaries know when they get on that OFAC sanction list. And so they'll attempt to masquerade their encryptor as someone else's encryptor. And we see that often. And so a lot of people will say like, oh, the ransom note matches this APT, therefore it's this encryptor. But then when you really start trying to dig into that encryptor, you find out, this looks a lot like Evil Corp. Pull up your Evil Corp sample, and it's the same thing. And so our duty, we have to report that. And we have to report that to our clients too. And there are cases where people have negotiated unknowingly and were held criminally liable for that at a later time. And then my last horror story is like a rebuild's not enough. It was a business that hit me up a little over a year ago, and their entire infrastructure had been ransomed. And they said, hey, we want a pen test. What? What do you mean? They said, well, we're gonna rebuild everything. And after we rebuild, we wanna call you guys and get you to give us a pen test to make sure we got everything secure. And I'm like, this is a really bad idea. Like, who's leading up the decisions on your side? Well, our legal team. Let me talk to your legal team. And I talk to their legal team. And I say, this is bad. Don't do this. The idea is the back door may still be wide open. Yeah, we trust it, but we're going to do what we want, right? And so they rebuild. They call us up to do a pen test. Josh Wilkes is doing the pen test, sitting right here. Raise your hand and smile. He's a beautiful man, everybody. And so Josh calls me like, I don't know, it's like an hour into the test, right? An hour into the test. And he's like, oh man, we got a big problem. Like, what's the problem? Like, their VPN is running a vulnerable application with a critical vulnerability that's 3 years old at this point, from 2018. This is 2021. And guess what? That critical vulnerability is trivial to exploit. He can see every user that's logged into that system, the password to every user, the group that user belongs to, and even if there's where that active connection is coming from. And so I call up the client and I say, like, hey, this is a big deal. You got to get the service shut down. And also, this is why you got ransomed. If you had called us before, we could have identified that. But because of this, you need to do another threat hunt. There's likely an attacker in your network again. I think we've seen logons from Slovenia, Russia, somewhere. It was not good. They were there again. And so they spent all this time, all this money to recover, and guess what? The back door's still open and the attacker's still in there. Furthermore, in that situation, it was an MSP-owned and controlled device, and they had reported the vulnerability to the MSP. The MSP was aware of the vulnerability, told them they couldn't patch it, so it would cause an outage. Yeah. There was definitely liability in that situation that we could have helped to improve. Always do an investigation. Don't think a rebuild's enough. But what can you do? What's up? You tell me to speed up? Speed up? I don't know what you're saying. 2 minutes? Oh shit, this is the most important part. All right, I'll go fast. I'm joking, we're almost done. So incident preparedness is key here. Assess yourself, get an assessment. We have some free assessments built for ransomware prevention and readiness. Check those tools out, they're here. The most important thing is to have a plan. Know what you're going to do when the incident occurs. Know how you're gonna respond. Make sure your whole team knows this and continually practice it. It's just like anything else. You're no good, your incident response plan is no good. If you draft it, you put it on a shelf. No one in your organization is aware of what it is, what their responsibilities are, and how to act. So continually test your plan through tabletops, MFA everything, default deny everything, ingress, egress, allow list all your applications, stay up to date on all your patches, baseline your environment. And the baseline's critically important because we can't identify evil unless we know normal. So baselining is critically important. Recon yourself so you can understand what the attackers know through the identification in the recon phase, and you can work to correct those things. Get your backups offline, period. They will find your backups. They will destroy your backups. Further, like I said, it's all about the culture, baby. People are our biggest risks. They will always be our biggest risk, and we can't be fixed with technology. We can be fixed and improved. We can't be fixed. We can be improved through education and the curation of an environment that encourages people to know what to do and report those things that they identify. Anything. I always give the example, like Pinky, who's our team lead, talks about an organization that he knew. They would just give candy bars to any employee that identified a potential phishing email or a potential security vulnerability, and they reported that. So they report it, you get a candy bar. Everyone likes candy. Guess what? Tons of emails started hitting the SOC. Guess what? Like, successful phishing attempts went down. Just do that. Reward your employees. And know that security is not one person's responsibility. Everyone is involved. It's not your security manager, it's not your security team, it's you, it's everyone in your organization from top to bottom. And our leaders have to set the tone, just like any other business function. Without the support of the leaders driving culture from top down, you'll never get an employee base that buys in and understands that they can report things without the fear of repercussions. That's it. We can be friends now. Yay!
All right. Whew.